Welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Here we talk about the connection between creativity and healing, and how we are creative and how creativity helps us heal mentally, physically, and emotionally. Join us now. Hi everyone, Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing, and today I have with me Deborah Epstein. Deborah is an artist, shamanic practitioner, healer, and creative spiritual guide. And a transformational coach, she has been supporting women and working in the healing arts for over 20 years. She is the CEO and lead dreamer at the Cosmic Dreaming Lodge in Sedona, Arizona, a place to heal, dream, and create. Welcome, Deb.
Thanks for having me. I love our conversations.
So much so that we have started a monthly live, I don't even know what to call it. Is it a podcast? It's a live, it's a show, but we get together once a month and share that with everybody.
Yeah, it is fun. Like, yeah, I just the one we've done so far, I got a lot of great feedback on that conversation. It shook a lot of mine. So
I did too. But I always love it when we get together, like even just now. So we get together to do this podcast, and we've just spent 45 minutes chatting about all sorts of spiritual and business and healing and all of those great things. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And so for those who might not know you, who doesn't know you, can you share some of your story and the path that has brought you to where you are now?
Oh, sure. I'd love to do that. I always go like, oh my gosh, it's such a long path. And so where to begin without like telling 58 years of it. But so the shortened version of that. So yeah, I got into art and healing through art school. And there was a moment when I was in art school where I was doing these paintings, like huge paintings, wall paintings. And my teacher at the time, he was just like overwhelmed really with all the work I was doing. Because when I do something, I just do it, I'm like I don't want to say to death, but to life, I get into it. And so we were at our half semester crit. I had all of my work on the wall. It was a big room and I filled every wall. And he was saying like how prolific I was in that class and, all the work that I've been doing. And one of the things that struck him the most about me was I had this message, it seemed, coming through all my work that was very dramatic and contrary to my demure nature. He used the word demure, and I was like, yeah, like I am a very quiet person. I'm, more of a hermit. And in that time in my life, in my 20s, I very much was an introvert and very mousy, just very much like afraid of the world. And that was really like the question that he asked of me, like, where is this powerful work coming from? From, you don't appear to me to have this depth. And I really started thinking about it because it was a good question. And, I hadn't thought of it before. And it really set me on my healing journey. That question was the question that got me going on my healing journey. And what I discovered was I wasn't, surprise, channeling the pain of the world in my paintings. It was my own pain. I was so disassociated from the things that happened to me in my childhood and my upbringing in my life up to that point. And I didn't have any awareness of like how trauma is stored in the body, how it's in our energetic system, how it's in our mind, how we act from it. And we're not even ourselves, really. We're not in our authenticity because we're in survival all the time. And that was just my natural state of being. I just didn't know, had no idea, and so disassociated that it's not mine, it's the whole universe's pain, right? How funny is that, right? So that got me looking, and of course, coupled with hitting some major walls in my life, needing to find help, I found a really awesome practitioner who was doing a combination of massage, myofascial release, and core belief work. I'm trying to think of called Theta Healing from Vienna Stibble. And it was powerful work because it was getting things on a lot of different levels. And the thing that she did with me is she would look at my artwork. I would, I was processing what I was discovering about myself through my artwork. And I still have all that work. It wants to be compiled at some point into a healing book, but not yet. But it was what she was using to help unearth some of my core beliefs, some of the trauma that I experienced, how I was framing that trauma for myself, and how I was acting out of it, and how I got to transform that. And so when she would always know when we were onto something, because my work would change, the colors I would use would change. I was working really subconscious. I was working, in that dream state, and just like, allowing the flow to happen. And so from there, I started to really kind of put together, well, first I know I needed to work in the body. I was working, as a Reiki master, and it kind of shifted what I was doing in art, and took a different program in art and healing. Was very like, not a lot of programs like that in the country at that time. And so it was really kind of on the edge of, it's not that it was never done before, it was just kind of on the edge for college. And it was a very like brand new kind of pilot program that I did, and it was really amazing. But then I couldn't figure out how to put it together. How do I get all these pieces? And because I love doing the body work, I loved getting in the body, I love doing the energy work, and I love doing the artwork. And how do I get people to play with me in that field? How do I do this? And so that question sat with me till the pandemic hit. Because I was adding pieces of it in, the shamanism, like that kind of was an addition that kind of followed in as a result of like when I did the body work. It was just kind of this weavy, zigzaggy pattern of adding different modalities in and exploration. I still do that. I'll be a lifelong explorer in the healing arts. But when the pandemic hit, I couldn't do hands-on body work anymore. So I got to be creative. And how does this want to come into play here? How can I bring this in now and marry it in with everything else that I know how to do? And the Cosmic Dreaming Lodge was born. Didn't start out as that, but it's developed into that. And that's kind of what you see behind me, is the imagination at play. Like, these are all my guides that I paint. They are very real to me. Some of them come in and I paint them, and then I get to know who they are. But when you start playing in that realm of the imagination, and playing in the unseen world, when you have like the framework of, say, shamanism, or a cultural kind of frame around it that looks at the imagination differently than we do in the Western world, it really just opens up a whole amazing doorway of where you can take your art, where you can expand into your creativity and your healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I've been on a similar path. Not so much. Oh, no. Okay. I was going to say I didn't do so much with the body work, but, I have my Reiki, and I started in reflexology. I didn't complete because I realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do, not where I wanted to put my energy. Studied under a shaman, did all of these different, a shamanic practitioner. Let's be honest about, no. All right, we're not going to start a whole thing about shamanism right now. I studied under a shamanic practitioner. I'm just going to leave it there. And
I understand and hear what you're saying. And we'll just say that.
Yeah. So there's that. All of these different things. And I think it was always that searching, right? Always that searching and trying to find more and exploring, and always working on my own healing, and creativity has always been woven into that, as it's so important. It's a key component of who I am, right? I think honestly, it's a key component of who everyone is. We just don't allow for it. Right? We just don't allow for it. But literally broke me not to be in creativity until I had to or die. And so very similar paths, very different, but very similar, how you have to do that work on the traumas that happened, when you were younger, and if you were like me, continued to happen because you didn't know what was happening. And so you kept having traumas until you finally went, oh, I'm a part of the problem. Okay.
Funny that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so important. And I think it's really amazing the work that you do. And I love the conversations we have, like I was saying at the beginning. And so saying that, the one question I ask every guest is, what does healing with creativity mean to you? And I think I know your answer, but maybe everybody else doesn't. So
yeah, it's funny because I like healing. I've been redefining that for myself because I I I don't know if this is true for everybody, but working in the healing arts field, when people come to do body work, especially, they want their pain to go away, they want to heal, they want to be fixed. And healing is such a transformational process that when you enter into healing, and that doesn't matter how you come to it, there's something that's not working that you want to work and you don't know what that is. You have an idea, and it could be the pain that brings you in. Usually it is some sort of pain, as you were saying, right? Mm-hmm. From the past, something you keep on doing that you don't know what it is that you keep on doing. Why do I keep creating this? Why does, this type of person keep entering my field and into my life? And it's that impetus that we need to make some sort of transformation. And so I've been really starting to look at healing, healed, it's like, the layers of the onion and all that kind of stuff, and how we're never really done. And it's funny, I kind of get caught up in how to talk about this now, because what I'm saying, I feel like I'm in the paradox of it, because things are getting better, things are moving in a right direction, things aren't as painful as they used to be, yet as we keep evolving, those behavior patterns, those systems are still going to come up and rear their heads. And it's always that, oh, I thought I healed that. Oh, I thought I fixed that. Oh, I mustn't have done it right. So like even that part of it comes back up again. And it's like, no, it's like what I've really working in the transformational work that I've been doing kind of helped me to see that like everything always wanting to move to the next level. And it's not about not being good enough. It's that everything in the universe is in motion. That yes, we're constantly in motion. Mm-hmm. New information is coming in to our field all the time. And we're not static, right? We move with everything else. Our consciousness is expanding and stretching. And so of course our survival programs are going to come up online because it's going to feel unsafe. And it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, or I did anything wrong, or you did anything wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's like, oh, this is what's going on. So it's like the work that I do now is really like, well, yes, it's healing because it's nourishing. It feels good, right? And it's also transformational because it helps get you to what you are wanting to create that you haven't created yet, for whatever the reason is,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just saying that, I was just thinking of that sort of that cycle, and I think of it more as the yarn, and you pull it and the knot. We've had this conversation before, and then, you untie that knot, or you tug on it a little, and then you'll find another one, or and so that's more how I look at it than the onion. But we're never done. Like if we're done, why are we here? Right. Yeah. So there's always something, but it's how quickly we can move through it, how we process it, what we do with that information. So maybe, something comes up and you think, I think I was done with that. I thought I was, and I can think of one thing in particular. And, and it's like, well, are you though? Because it's a pattern that, okay, it didn't like bring me to my knees this time. This time I went, oh, that's interesting. Or, wow, we obviously still need to do some work around that. Right. So every time it's a little bit easier, but it comes up because we have, like you said, new information. We have new ways of dealing with things. And so can we be completely done with something until we have all the information? I don't know, right? So
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with why things come back, but it's how quickly you're able to process that, how quickly
Mhm.
you move through
Yeah,
it.
how you shift out of it. Yeah, for
Mm,
sure. It doesn't mean that the thought doesn't exist in the head. It's just like it just doesn't have the same heat it did maybe 15 years ago, you
mhm,
know. And one of the tools that I like to use as an example of that patterning that you were talking about is the Mandelbrot set, or the Mandel. I think I always say it wrong because it's French. It's Mandelbrot, and Benoit Mandelbrot. He came up with the fractal geometry,
mhm,
and when the computers got to a certain point of like being able to do mathematical equations, he discovered the mathematical set for fractals, and it's actually what helped computer graphics take off in the way that it did, because we live in a fractal universe. And so the mathematics on that kind of proves it does prove it. So we too are nature, and so our nature is pattern. How we operate in patterns. And you think about behavior patterns, you have the ancestral patterns, right? You have the cultural patterns, you have the familial patterns, right? The tribal patterns, the patterns that you developed yourself from how you perceived all of that. So you just start thinking about, when I talk about this, I always get like this image in my head of like these really cool designs, and how we're living through them. We're running our energy, we're running our consciousness through these, right? That's 90% of how we operate in the world. 10% is actual awareness. And
mhm.
so, yeah, we're going to mess up. Things are going to come to the shift. It's going to feel weird when you do something different that you haven't done before. It's going to be uncomfortable when you're, say, like, you know, I should post one of my piece of artwork out on social media, and oh, the butterflies in the stomach. And it's like, that's the reason we don't do stuff, because we feel that uncomfortable in our body. And we are getting those trauma signals, like it's not safe to do this, it's not safe to do this. But it takes that like intestinal fortitude to go like, okay, yes, I feel you, and I know that you've been burned in the past, but we're going to do this. We're going to do this because the need to expand is greater than the need to shrink. And it's, I'm thinking of the Aeneas men, about the need to blossom versus stay in a tight bud.
Mhm.
um, that's such a great example, or poem for how we grow in the world. So yeah, the Mandelbrot set, like if you can YouTube that, and go to YouTube and say Google it on YouTube, search for it. Google has become synonymous with search
Yes.
for me.
It really has. They've made it that way. It's so interesting because we were actually having, as you know, but our listeners don't, we were just talking about sort of those pain points and pushing clients past those pain points. And
Mhm.
and one of the things that I struggle with some clients, not all clients, is like how far to push them, how far to push them. And then having to look at my own discomfort in that, right? And so um, we were talking about how to, um, well, I need to look at that part in my own self, but also then how we can adjust it so we have that conversation, because you cannot move forward without being uncomfortable. You cannot
Right.
expand without being uncomfortable. So you need to be comfortable in being uncomfortable, or you're not going to expand,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
that's how we grow, that's how we heal, that's how we change. And
Yeah.
it's scary as hell.
It is scary, and it is uncomfortable. And I love that you just said, we get to be uncomfortable. We get to be comfortable being uncomfortable. One of my mentors used to say that all the time.
Mhm.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I remember the first time I heard that, it was like, what? Why would I want to do that? But
That's
it's
how
like,
it works. Yes.
yeah, that's how it works, because it's like, well, you're desensitizing yourself to those things that usually stop us. And like, yes, we're human beings too. And we see the places where we're stopping. We're feeling the places where we're stopping. The only difference is that we've been doing this work enough that we see the signs in ourselves. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you know, being in 100% responsibility for my own creation and my own body. What am I feeling right now, you know?
Mm.
And yeah, holding someone in their pain point is really hard to do, especially when you're a nurturer, and you know, if you have that need to want to fix or make better, you know.
Mhm.
You know, like just think about like, oh, your little kid that fell, and you want to like, oh, let me, you know, I know that hurts you, but let me try and absorb some of that pain for you. And we don't, we won't help anybody get stronger if we do that, you know. And so that's, it's not about being tough as nails, it's that balance of Callie and Kuan Yin.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't, it's very true. And I recognize it. Like, that's why we were having that conversation, right? Because I recognize that it wasn't working. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, figuring out the shift that I need to make to help my clients even more. And because I think I do a pretty good job as it is, they probably don't know that I'm having this. Probably shouldn't be sharing it, but you know, the very real thing is,
Awesome that you're sharing it, because I think that's part of it. It's like, yeah, we're all human, you
yeah,
know, that's
yeah,
part of it. Nobody knows better than we know, but we need help looking at things. That's the whole, the mirroring. I tell people all the time, I have, you know, I have a coach, I use a coach.
mm,
And I think that's an asset, you know, so that people know that, yeah, I bump up against stuff too. It's not that I bump up against it that makes me bad or wrong. It's that, you know, I get to move through it. And that's what
yeah,
I'm modeling, how that happens, that it happens. And that, you know, I think some of, you know, what in the past, what happens is you see someone in their kind of finished, polished state, like they didn't see all the muck, you know, and nobody will see that. Nobody will see the muck that you personally had to go through to get to where you are right here, right? Just like me, you know. And I mean, honestly, I can look back on my journey and go like, and even go like, wow, it really wasn't that bad, but boy, was it really hamstringing me. But I think, you know, it really was that bad. I think that's just the distance, you know, because there's no more heat on it, you know, there's
mhm,
no more heat on it. And it was horrible and it was uncomfortable. And like right now, I'm thinking in my mind of one time at when I was at a seminar, like how I almost quit because it was like it got to what I had to look at got too intense for me. It
mhm,
got really, really, and I'm like, how much do you really want to do this? Really?
yeah,
But what's on the other side? Me.
mhm,
I'm on the other side.
yeah.
You know?
I had a similar experience. I had traveled to a training, and you know, I'm in this hotel by myself, and it was like 12, 15-hour days of like intense work. And the end of the second day, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm going home. Like, forget this. And then I had to sit with it through the, because where am I going to go, really? You know,
Mhm.
the airport was so tiny. I don't even know if there would have been a flight when I wanted to get out of there. But it was like, I had to sit with that and be like, okay, what are you running away from? What are you
Mm,
avoiding? What do you need to? And I was there to do the work, to learn to do the work. And, you know, but you have to do the work to learn to do the work. And
absolutely.
yeah, and then it was like, okay, I can do this. I got this,
Mhm.
you know, incredibly painful, very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but man, so much better when you get out the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. And what helps is, you know, for me, like, you know, as I think back to that experience, I was in Pennsylvania, I was in Valley Forge, and I went to Valley Forge State Park, and I was driving around, and it was the grace. It was the grace of spirit. I had a deer cross my path. And, and it was so funny. I was like, oh, look at that. That deer is gorgeous. What a beautiful deer. And I was like, thank you for that gift. And then I kept going. And then another deer passed in front of me. And I thought like, wow. And there's some level of, I wasn't connecting the dots of like, that was for me.
Hmm.
And then the third deer passed my, passed over my path. And then I finally looked up what deer meant. And it was so relevant to what I was experiencing. And I broke down and cried. And that's what got me through it, because I know it was my message from spirit that I'm not doing this alone. I may feel alone. I may feel isolated. I may feel like I'm in the pit of despair, but spirit is right there with me.
Mhm.
and that proved that to me. And that is, when I get there, it's grace. I ask for grace, 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 grace. Come, fill me up.
And just, hearing you say that, because there are so many times we don't pay attention, right? We don't pay attention.
Mhm,
And I mean, many things happen and we get so caught up in our day and all of that. But there are very purposeful things that happen to remind you or to give you a message. And if you're not paying attention, it's going to happen again. Or you might, something else will happen and it'll be like, well, I tried to warn you, but you weren't paying attention. So, those sort of things. And so the more we can start to sort of sit with that, but also
mhm.
that spending time with spirit, right? And
Yeah.
actually conversing, or in whatever way that is for you. I do a lot of intuitive writing, because
Mhm,
that's the conversations I have. But without that, I have to have, maybe I have to hit that deer for me to go, oh, you're trying to tell me that, right? Now my car's wrecked. So, I'm okay, but my car's wrecked because I wasn't paying attention. And I've had a lot of those sort of hit me upside the head with a 2x4 because I
mhm,
don't pay attention. And so I have really been trying to sit with, how can I, um, how can I listen more? Stop
mhm,
trying to be like in charge of everything. How can I just listen? See what, because spirit, the universe, God, whoever it is for you, has your best interest. They want the best for you.
mhm.
So if you just allow and stop trying to control, this is, I'm talking to myself here, stop trying to control, and we, you know, totally. And it's like, it's amazing how things unfold. It's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too. I started, I was telling you before, like I'm reading like 5 different books or whatever. One of the books that I'm reading, and this is why I'm reading 5 different books, because I started with this one. Well, actually, this is like the third book in them, but I found this book, and it's called Conscious Language by Robert Tennyson Stevens, that I found off of, I think it was Greg Braden talked about him. So I'm like, oh, let me look this up. That sounds
Yeah.
interesting. Yep, it's the skipping stone of information. But it's really interesting because what I like about it is it's what he teaches, how we speak to ourselves, how we internal dialogue, and how we create with our language. And one of the things, in the Pachacuti Mesa tradition, one of the axioms is, well, consciousness begets reality, language begets reality. Or language, because it, it
Mhm.
it creates our reality. Our language
Mhm.
creates our reality. It's a vibrational frequency. So even if you go, oh, I'm going to consciously watch what I say and how I say it, if your vibrational energy, if what you're feeling isn't congruent to your words, that kind of creates some sort of jam in the system. Anyway, like it was just something that you said that triggered that. And I think it was the I am. He talks when he in the book, when you're reading it, it's I am in capital letters, and everything he says is I am this, I am that. It's like I am statements. It's like realizing, like, well, I am the power of creation.
Mhm.
I am that. I am the one consciousness. It's part of the law of one, which is, we're all that. We're all, God isn't, somewhere up in a cloud in a mansion and, handing out things if we're good, or, do the right things, or punishing us for that matter for doing the wrong things. That's totally of our own making, of how we talk about God. God is male, and God is, has a long white beard, and I actually like,
God is
um
white.
God is white. Yes, like all of those things, we've humanized that, right? And
Mhm.
it matches, it mirrors our patriarchy. We talk about that a lot, right? We
Mhm.
talk about the patriarchal influence on on our spirituality, on all of that, right?
Mhm.
So it's really interesting, because even when I say the word God, I have a hard time with it when I say it. So I like saying spirit, because it doesn't have that same, I'm not connected to that word in the same way.
Mhm.
So it's I think too, finding our own way of how we want to say things is really helpful till we can get the program out of there. I mean, and if it's a pattern, right, that we're all currently living in, it's going to creep into our language because it's part of our culture. And so that's another place. And I guess all of that to kind of say, like, it's another place that's going to rear its head when we go next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, you're going to get, like, especially if you're a woman, you're going to get all of those reasons why you're supposed to shut up, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Yeah.
not speak your truth, not speak what you know. Don't rock the boat, whatever, passive aggressive, like manipulation, all the things that we learned how to do
Mm-hmm.
to help us find our way and be in the world, right? But we're wanting to do that differently.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And hence, and it's funny because Deb and I, you and I, were just talking, well, before we started, about similar programs again that we're both offering, because we seem to get the exact same downloads at the exact same time. You know, we get a slightly different version based on sort of where we're coming from and how we're doing it. But the information, essentially, what we want to shift and change is the same thing. And I just find that fascinating, especially the connection you and I have, but also I often see it elsewhere in the spiritual community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that connection, that energy, that information that's needed is being fed to all of us. And those who are willing to share are all grabbing it and moving forward with it. I think it's being shared to a lot more than making it come alive, but
yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like, if it's true, we're all one consciousness and consciousness is expanding. We're all having an experience of that, right? We're all having an experience of that. And where we sit in our experiences, right? Some of us are leading in that, right? We're leaders in the field of creativity and healing and arts and all that kind of stuff, and how it speaks through us, right? So that's, if you're listening to this or watching this, and this is a field that you've been wanting to enter into, but haven't because you have that lack feel, like, oh, there's already so many people doing this, and it's going to be a struggle, and maybe
I'm not
that's
good enough,
true.
and I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't know
enough. Yeah. BS. The truth of the matter is, how many billions or trillions of people there are on the planet that are all waking up right now that could use your help? And
we can't do it all. Like, I can
we were
only
just
reach so
talking
many
about,
at a time.
like, like how people can get burnt out being in service in this way, because there's a balance that needs to happen. We get to live in that balance, right? And serve and be of service to our communities and those who are wanting to come up. It's like, come on up already, stop telling the story. I'll help you. That's that's kind of where my business, I think, is starting to expand into, is
Many
helping
of us,
is helping women to find that pathway. Maybe it is online, maybe it isn't online, but like, the trend is online, because that's where more and more people are showing up, especially since the pandemic. That's shifted somewhat, as people are going back, but I don't know how done we are with the big wake up, the big slaps.
No, there's
if we're
in the throes of it, but it's a long time. Like,
if we're experiencing it on a personal level, that we need to be hit upside the head a few times before we get the message, I can safely say that, like, that's going to happen on a collective level too.
It's so true. And it's interesting what you were just saying about that business part of it, because that's a model I'm seeing so many others, because I've been doing it for a while now, and I love collaborations. And so summits are kind of that thing that I do often, because I love collaborations, and then other things come out of that. Books have been written, live shows have been done, all of these different things from collaborations. But then I've also now opened up the business side, right? As many creatives, healers, spiritual people are doing, because there's so many people coming in that need that guidance. And we've figured it out the hard way. So let's help people figure it out a little bit easier so we can get more of this energy helping more people, because we can't do it all. And not only we can't do it all, burnout and all of that, but also the fact that, everybody speaks a slightly different dialect, if you will, right? Like
Yeah.
the words that I use are not always the same words that you use, and and so we resonate with different people. And that's one of the things I love about the collectives with my summits is we all speak a little different. And so we bring all of these people together and they can find the best for them, right? What's going to really speak to them. And I know when I first started, I had so many people say, well, they're just going to steal your ideas, or that seems like a bad idea. They do what you do and it's competition. No, we're all trying to share this message. We're all trying to help the healing, and creativity is such an amazing way to do that. And then, but the spiritual aspect of it, there's just so many components. And when we come together, we can just do that on such a grander scale, that many more people.
Yeah. And the thing is like, it's an evolution, right? And, as we are coming into more and more awareness and not operating from like, the healing, the cycle of healing, I see this a lot because I work with a lot of healers in my practice. And, one of the things I see a lot is that thing we learned how to do, like, like something's not working. There must be something in my past. I got to go back and fix it. I didn't fix it right. And I think that awareness that no, you're at the next level and you need to take the next step, and going back to heal it or fix it, it's an exercise in futility. It's coming up for a reason. And, you get to expand into that too. Stop waiting, you heal as you go, you're healed enough. And as you go and as you expand and as you create and these things come up, well, those get to expand too, right? And so I guess it's so funny because that question about healing kind of opened up this whole thing that we're talking about. And I guess it's like, stop going after the healing all the time, but
well,
yeah.
Yes and no, because argue this point just a little bit. I think it's all in how you look at it, right? I think working with healers is a little bit different than working with people who are trying to figure it out, right? I work with a lot of people who are just trying to figure it out. They don't even necessarily know that there's a problem. And so we start with the basics of, let's create, let's just get into that. And what do we need to feed our soul? And then as we do that, we sneak in a little bit of this, healing work, as in, let's look at a few things and then what comes up with that. And I tend to be a little sneakier. I do tell you, I'm not that sneaky actually, but
This is about as sneaky.
I'm not very good at being sneaky, just so you know. And so,
I'm going to tell you all my secrets right here.
That's right here. But maybe it's more not entry level, but people who are just starting to figure out that they have a pattern, right? Oh yeah, I've done some work, but I didn't know I had patterns. I've done some work here, but I didn't know I had this here. I think as you get further up or further along your journey, maybe is a better way to look at it. Further, there's a spiral that you do. That you start to look at it a little differently, right? And it's like, what do I just need to know right now? What's gonna that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's really true. Yeah. And I do get to remember like my experiences and who I work with isn't, the same for everybody. I do honor the healing path. I guess it's just I've been looking at healing differently, from a transformational model or lens. Let's put it this way, because it is to me, it is transformational. Not that you don't, because you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater either,
and you're not ever healed. It's not like you find a cure and you're like, oh, I'm all better now. It's not like that either, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's work. And so I guess maybe it's the language we use. right? It's the
Yes, I
language.
was just gonna say, yeah, it's probably comes down to the language and how we're defining it,
Mhm.
Yeah, because we do that, like it does, it hangs us up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because we don't
So we end
we're
up
coming,
arguing the same point. We're
yeah,
talking about the same thing. We're just saying it
or
differently.
differently. Yeah. Love that. Or we're picking it apart to death, right?
Mhm.
But
That's what we do.
but it makes sense though when you think about it, right? Because what we're creating right now, we're shifting paradigms.
Mhm.
So we don't have the language yet for that next iteration, that next paradigm shift. And so that's also part of that conscious language book that I'm reading is like that. It's like if language is a part of how we are creating, we have to or get to start talking about it differently, you know,
Mhm.
but doesn't mean we do something differently, if that makes sense.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that healing is part of that, right? But what do we, what does it mean, you know, to heal, you
And
know?
that is that transformation, right?
Yeah,
To transform what's happening into something different. And
yeah.
that's very interesting you say that, because Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
I love
So
that book.
I often talk about emotions and different emotions. We work on different emotions in my programs and things like that. So um, Brené Brown, who I love, and Atlas of the Heart, and sort of dissecting all of the emotions. But one of the things that she talks about is our language, and as we can learn to use the language that best expresses, so that we can sort of share our story in a deeper way, right?
Mhm.
And she talks about specifically emotions, and it's like we
Yeah.
we stick with these 5 core emotions, and then it's like, oh, I'm sad. Well, are you sad? Or is there something more to that? Is there another
Mhm.
layer to that? What are you really? Well, I'm really frustrated, and maybe kind of disappointed that it didn't work out. So you're not sad. I mean, higher level, if that's where you're at, you're sad. But
Mhm.
you know, when you start to dig deeper, you're able to express that, be able to understand it more, you're able to share it more. So as talking about language, as we do that more and more, if we can all then start to understand each other better because of it.
Mhm.
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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of goes down to that, like that curse of being separate, or thinking you're alone
Mhm.
in what you're moving through. And the themes that we've been working through in the last, like, I don't know, decade or more, of the interconnected nature, we're all one, that awareness that's coming through. And what does that really mean? And how I can't picture that, like I'm in this separate body, and you're in your separate body, and you're in Canada, and I'm in Arizona, and
Mhm.
so we're pretty separate, but we're connected.
Mhm.
It's like, how do we wrap our minds around that? And language also is a way of helping that understanding, experiential, sort of lived experience, kind of languaging. And how are we connected with nature, and how are we one with nature? And we have that, all that programming that like teaches us, like, well, we have dominion over nature, and we get to dictate what trees get knocked down and
Mhm.
not replanted, or we get to take everything out of the coal mine or everything out of the ground because we're human and we get to use it, you know
Mhm.
and it's not like we're not operating from the win-win. Like, how can we have both, where
Mhm.
our needs are met, you know and
Without
we can,
destroying other people's.
without destroying other people. So it's like that awareness of, like, you're not
Mhm.
alone. But it's I kind of reflecting back onto something I said earlier, when you're in the throes of like a healing crisis,
Mhm.
that you do feel alone. And that's the emotion of,
Mhm.
I don't belong, or I don't, like, from Brene Brown's work, belonging and connection and disconnection. that, for me personally, disconnection was a tool I used because I'm bad. What I feel and think is bad and wrong. And I don't want to harm another
Mhm.
with my energy or my thoughts, my emotions, or whatever. So I'll just like unplug and do everybody a favor. But
Mhm.
that's a learned behavior. That's what I learned, growing up,
Yeah.
you know.
And we often do, especially as women, learn to do that. But culturally, we
Mm,
all like, if you can't play the game at this level, you know, you shouldn't even be on the field. And it's like, no, you actually
mhm.
need to be on the field because that level is not sustainable. So we need to have everybody on the field so that we can figure out what we as a collective all need together, right?
Right.
Instead of
Yeah.
letting the ones who can sustain that,
Mhm.
which is a very few, uh, rule the roost, basically, right? So,
Yeah.
which is what we've seen for.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece of this too that kind of popped in as you were talking is like, well, there's the whole soul purpose thing too.
Mhm.
What if who are listening to this, have this nudge to want to get your work out into the world, whatever that happens to be, whatever, maybe you don't even know yet, but you have a nudge. You don't
Mhm.
know what it's going to look like, but you have something that is driving you, but you keep feeling like you're hitting the wall and you're in that depression. Like, I know I need something. I don't know what it is, or I'm supposed to be doing something. What if you like contracted on the other side, you contracted to work with certain people, certain souls, you know,
Mhm.
and that nudging that you're feeling, that depression that you're feeling, or that even if it's anger, frustration, overwhelm, all of those things that we talk about is part of the signaling that,
You're not living up to your contract.
yeah, get up and go, man.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's that like, well, which is worse?
Mhm.
Which is worse for you? Sitting in that's the pain, right? Sitting in the pain of it and not expressing what your soul is driving you to do. You feel it right in here.
Mhm.
It's like that's where the pain is like right in there. And the pain is also up in here because that's the ping pong game that keeps going on.
Yes.
You can't because you don't know. You haven't done this. You haven't, it's like whatever the story is up here and keeps you out of feeling this. This needs to be felt. And then where do we want to drive this bus to? Like, what are you here to do? And so, yeah.
And we can just go into a whole thing on this and we might have
I
to
know.
save it for our show, but I just want to just make a note because it's so true. And we often get stuck with because we think outside the box and then, well,
Mhm.
we don't fit in. No, you're not supposed to fit in. You're not
Yeah.
supposed to fit in. You're supposed to stand out. And that's how change happens. That's how your change happens. That's how you help other people. And you're going to get so much pushback. You're going to get so many people who are like, oh, yeah, you shouldn't do that. No, that's a bad idea. Don't you know, so and so did that in the 1600s. It didn't work out. Whatever story they keep hearing
That one time.
that one time. And so, like, you're going to hear all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Uh, I remember my mother-in-law like being so upset when I left my government job because the benefits and the pension. And it was like, but it's literally killing me, like
Mhm.
literally killing me,
Mhm.
like dead or no pension. I'm going to go with no pension. I'm all right with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? Because I have to move out of this. That depression was so bad, it almost killed me.
Yeah.
And that was my turning point. And I
Yeah.
said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. You hear that so often. And yeah, it's painful and it takes time to turn the
Mhm.
boat around, to turn that ship around because you
Mhm.
have all of the resistance around you, right? And that some of that too is like the people in our lives too. If you change and you're demonstrating something that can be done, then they have to kind of look at that too in themselves. And not a lot of people want to do that. So
Mhm.
that's telling you that what you're doing is wrong. I mean, I get that with when I left my job too. Like,
Mhm.
what are you crazy? You closed your practice, you moved across the country, you dragged my son across the country, and now you're quitting this job too. Like, loser. And it's like, no, I'm listening to my soul. I'm listening
Mhm.
to my soul, and it doesn't follow the guidelines and pathways of our society all the time. And it's scary as hell.
Mhm.
But when you've had enough experience, and you get little experiences, and that's, one thing I will say as a caveat to this is start to let yourself have those smaller experiences of trusting your soul's guidance, like the voice of your soul. Get to know the voice of your soul, so
Mhm.
that you have that trust built up on those little things, right?
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to take those big, huge leaps, they're scary. I remember when I left my job here, like, I was like, not again. Why? I don't want to do it this way. Like, can't there be
Mhm.
another way? Apparently that's the way I wanted to do it, And what am I proving to myself? That, like, I'm resilient, that I land on my feet. What is some of the things that I didn't see about myself
Mhm.
that are maybe other people see that I'm just blind to? So yet again, I'm going to do another leap, but I
Mhm.
think because I did that one with a lot more awareness, I would love to say I got the lesson, but we'll see.
Well, there's another one in there somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's always.
I love having conversations with you, but I think we're going to wrap up here and just remind people that you can also join Deb and I monthly, the third Monday of the month. We do a live YouTube and Facebook streaming. And so we have information. So if you want to, find out more, make sure that you don't miss it, get on our mailing list. We'll have the links there. And so that you don't miss that, because we have these amazing conversations every month. So but I want to thank you so much, Deb, for being here. I do. I
You're
love
welcome.
conversations. So, any final thoughts as we say goodbye today?
Oh no, I don't want to overload the audience with my final thoughts, because I mean, I don't know, my thoughts will never be final.
I love that. I love that. So, well, to our listeners, we will see you again next time. And in the meantime, I wish for you amazingly creative days. Thank you for listening. If you found our podcast of interest, we'd love for you to leave a review wherever you listen in.